incredibly true. Good to see Tennille having some fun over here there as well. Chadwick Ivory says, extremely encouraged by how this UGA team shook off the noon start to dominate the pit boss and his hogs on a national stage. And Chadwick, aren't you like me just kind of glad this game is over now so we can go back to kind of viewing Pittman the way that we had before? It was very weird to see him in the role of enemy on Saturday. Very, very strange thing all the way around. And so I'm kind of glad now that listen, I hope Arkansas wins the rest of the games it plays this year. I like Pittman that much. And that is now kind of nice to kind of have him back there in that spot. And clearly it was Georgia domination on Saturday, as you said. Don says Bennett seems more like trying to force throws that aren't there. Yeah, he's the backup for a reason. If JT Daniels is healthy, you want JT Daniels playing. Part of what sometimes, Bennett's made some very big throws in his time as the Georgia quarterback, but one of the things that is a little bit different, and we're on the other platforms now, by the way. All right, so we're getting ready to start the regular show, but I'll finish this comment before we do. One of the things that Bennett has had true of him is this is not a game manager quarterback. I say this all the time. Because of his profile as, kind of former walk-on, guy who had been counted out, guy who left Georgia because he wasn't, or at least was on his way to leaving Georgia because he didn't think he had a role here to come back. There's kind of an underdog nature to his story, which I think would lead some to believe that Bennett's going to be kind of a game manager, coach on the field type guy when he gets a chance to play. But that's never quite been the way that he sees himself. Bennett's one of those guys, and this is one of the reasons why he earns respect of his teammates, because there's a certain swagger that he tries to play with. Yes, he will try to force throws. Yes, he will be willing to throw the ball into tight windows. And has that resulted in interceptions before? It absolutely has. Did that result Saturday in at least one instance where he maybe could have had a pass picked off? Yeah. That's also the case there as well. That Bennett is sometimes a little bit risky with how he throws it. That's just kind of who his personality is as a quarterback. And you take the good, you take the bad with that. As I said before, there's a reason he's the backup, not the starter, and that may be, one of those reasons. But as you're identifying that, I think you also have to give thanks for the fact that Georgia has a much better backup quarterback situation than probably Alabama does, probably Clemson does. There are a lot of big programs around this country that don't quite have the quarterback depth that Georgia does, and the fact that Georgia's going through this with Daniels, it was a total non-factor in the game on Saturday. That's a really, really big deal, and I think you got to give the entirety of the Georgia program, Bennett included, a lot of credit for making that be the case. All right, let's get the regular show started. So here's what's coming up. It's John STINCHCOMB on the way. We'll do a classic City Logger Insider update with him, his thoughts on everything that goes down. We had some commenters a moment ago, and as a part of our 1st and 15, mentioned the combative Kirby Smart when talking about the quarterbacks. We'll play you all of that. That's going to be really fun. I thought there was a very significant moment in Saturday's game in which I think you see the evolution of Kirby Smart as a coach. This is bad news for anybody who wants to play the Dogs because there's a real edge to the way that Georgia's approaching its business right now that's unlike what's been, I think, true for the program before. That's not good if you're trying to beat UGA. And we will just begin by really basking in what was one of the real special days between the hedges in maybe quite some time. This was a good day. This is going to be a fun show. I'm happy to have all of you with us for it. As DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Boy, what a day it was between the hedges on Saturday, and we kind of knew going into it that it was going to be one of those days that we were just going to remember. I think a lot of us were pretty confident in Georgia going into the game. The weirdness that kind of emerged with JT Daniels maybe changed some of that a little bit. By the way, we'll get into quarterbacks heavy before our show is done today. But it was just one of those days that, I shot up out of bed that morning, a little bit less sleep than I like to have gotten, but no issue. It's almost like a kid on Christmas morning. You come flying out of the bed, you're getting dressed, you're getting ready, you're getting in the car, and you're just rolling down the road. And you got the sense, whether it be the crowd that was gathered around game day or the tailgating. I mentioned this on our post-game show at the UGA bookstore on Saturday night. There was this great moment for me where I was walking over to do the dog walk, and I heard three things simultaneous. I heard the sounds of ESPN's College Game Day. I heard the Red Coat Band doing some of their scales, kind of getting warmed up. There was rock music blaring from a tailgate. And all three of these noises just kind of blended together in the perfect medley. And you just kind of look around and you're left to say, this is really the epicenter of college football. And it doesn't get more college football than this. And Georgia fans understanding all of that, top 10 matchup in Sanford Stadium, Georgia fans were given a real challenge. Noon games are not easy, right? You have to wake up way early. I talked to a lot of folks on Friday who were, have to wake up at 5 a.m. just to be there in time to even be where they needed to be in time for the game to begin. There was a lot of early wake-up calls on Saturday. But Smart said that the fans needed to be elite. And I think it's actually a really generous act on Smart's part to make all of DawgNation feel like they're a part of this, because that's ultimately what people want from sports. They want to feel like they're a part of something big. They want to feel like they want to feel like their presence matters. And Smart, to his credit, does a really good job of making every fan in that stadium and everybody who is, kind of watching on TV, he does a really good job of making them all feel like they're kind of a part of it. And really, after the game on Saturday, went so far as to even almost give a numeric value to what the impact of the fans was between the hedges. This is going to be a fun show. We're going to look back on a lot of what happened on Saturday. No better way to begin than this right here. This is how impactful Smart thought Georgia fans were against the Razorbacks on Saturday. Here is Kirby.
I think all you guys would admit they were elite, and we noticed it. And to come out there in warm-ups and coming out of the tunnel to look up there and see every seat full at a noon kick, it's special to be at Georgia, and they impacted the game. I thought the first series for Arkansas on offense, our crowd was extremely disruptive. I thought our crowd impacted the block punt in terms of cadence and things like that, which forced a touchdown. So I give our crowds, our fans, at least 10 points, and that's big.
And I thought the ESPN TV cameras did a really good job of capturing this. And they did something kind of unique. And if you were at the game, you should go back and rewatch this on TV if you can. As someone who does a little play-by-play myself, like those of us who do this are motor mouths usually. We can't shut up. And yet Chris Fowler at the beginning of the game on Saturday, he kind of laid out, right? I mean, he was willing to let the natural sound tell the story of those first couple of plays for Arkansas. And those of you remember, it's the crowd's getting louder and louder. The Seven Nation Army plays, and everybody kind of gets that chant going. And then there's this huge crescendo of noise. And like Fowler and Herbstreit are saying nothing on TV. It's actually kind of a cool moment. They're saying nothing on TV. They're just letting it tell the story. Arkansas false starts. Back it up. Crowd gets even louder. Herbstreit and Fowler still aren't saying anything. And it's one of those things. You just don't see this on TV very much kind of begin the game, just letting the fans tell the story. They kept getting louder. They kept getting louder. Arkansas kept responding negatively. The shifting, the movement of the Georgia defensive line, the noise of the crowd. And it was just obvious from the word go that they were going to be overwhelmed by being between the hedges, and the combination of the stout Georgia defense and everything else that was kind of going on with the program. The combination of all that was just going to overwhelm Arkansas. Smart said it was at least 10 points, crediting to the Georgia fans for that. He called them elite. But then later on in this press conference, he actually upped the ante and he raised the stakes and said he took the idea of being elite, he took it to another level. Here's Kirby Smart again.
To be that loud at noon, it's beyond elite. I mean, let's call it like we see it. We challenged the fans because I knew we needed them. They answered the bell. The players answered the bell. Total team unity and effort and buy-in from the fan base and everybody else. Now, if we can just not get complacent, coaches, players, fan base, take things for granted and not have that same impact at other home games, then we can be a good football team. And I thought it was – I know it's as loud as I've ever heard it at 12 because I've never even seen it packed at 12, but it may have been one of the loudest ever.
I mean, doesn't it feel like that's really true? And first of all, I love the idea that Smart says, it's beyond elite. And I was there. Connor Riley, who's producing today, was sitting beside me, and we kind of looked around at the very beginning of the game, and I just felt very happy to be there. And I don't know. It's like, sometimes you pinch yourself. You're like, I can't believe that, I get to be a part of a college football situation like this. And for those of us who were there, it's like, boy, whatever's happened in my life to lead me to the point where I'm sitting here right now, then things are going pretty well if I'm getting a chance to experience that. Because there's just not a lot of days in life that give you that much fun and that much enjoyment. And it's not just about beating Arkansas. As Kirby said, it's about right now the fact that and this has not been a perfect season for Georgia. There are star players who are injured. Darnell Washington thankfully came back and got a chance to play on Saturday, but he's probably still not quite back where he needs to be. Obviously, George Pickens, Georgia's arguably best player, got injured during spring practice. There is a major issue going on at quarterback. And yet all of that just seemed like on the back burner. I mean, it really did seem like that Georgia as a fan base, there's nobody arguing right now. Everybody just seems to be having a good time. There seems to be a lot of, as Smart says, a lot of unity amongst everybody who kind of comes under the umbrella of DawgNation. It just sort of seems like everybody's kind of moving the same direction right now. And I got to tell you, that's a pretty nice place to be. As someone like me who sits here at this desk and in front of this microphone and kind of narrates this experience, I got to tell you, this is a pretty good time to be doing a show like this. This is a pretty good time to be watching Georgia football because it just sort of seems like everybody's just kind of doing right now what you always sort of hope it can be like, which is coming together on Saturdays, watching a great team play great, having a great time do it. Just make sure you soak all of this up. Make sure you take all of it in because there are a lot of college football seasons that won't bring you as much joy as this one seems like it has the potential to bring. And Smart says you can't get complacent. Nothing's given. Nothing's taken for granted. Georgia didn't have this game gifted to them on Saturday. They had to go out there and take it from Arkansas the same way. The 4 games prior to that, much the same way. You got to go out there and take it from your opponent, and it gets harder. And I don't care if Florida lost on Saturday, and I don't care what Auburn looked like, prior to winning the game against LSU. I don't care about any of that kind of stuff. You've got to take the same level of, tenacity, especially players and coaches, the same level of tenacity for the rest of the season as you've had for the first 5 games. But I'm along for the ride right now. And I think a lot of you very much feel the same way, that you just can't wait to see where all this goes next. Let's talk on the field here for a moment there too. Because clearly, and you don't have to look very far to see this in the national media, what Georgia's doing from a defensive standpoint right now, 2 consecutive shutouts, getting after quarterbacks, impactful in every way you possibly can. What Georgia's doing from a defensive standpoint right now is beyond anything I've ever seen before. And I told you after the first game against Clemson that, I just really felt like it was the best Georgia defense I'd ever seen play in a big game. And it keeps getting better because I think that what you've seen now replicated in all the games since then is this is something that truly is playing at the elite level. Smart says all the time, you're either elite or you're not, or at least he said that a lot this year. I don't think there's any doubts where this Georgia defense is on that scale right now. They are clearly in the elite direction here, and Smart gave him a lot of praise after the game, as he should. Kirby again.
I was proud of the defense because they got a good offense. That quarterback is one of the toughest human beings I've ever seen. He doesn't blink. He doesn't flinch. He's tough, man. He sits in there. He's hard to tackle. Coach Browse does a good job with off-tempo stuff. And, hey, look, all we told our defense all week is you ain't played nobody. And they went out and played. I don't know what they were, 26th, 30th. I really don't know. I know they had beaten 2 good football teams, and they went out and they shut those guys out. And you know what we're going to tell them next week? They ain't played nobody, So we're going to keep preaching to get better and grow. We're not where we need to be. But as long as they're like buying in, because we got this really good vibe on our team of complementary football, special teams, offense, defense, and the defensive coaches do a great job of selling to the defense that, hey man, what you're doing is elite. You're special. Now we didn't force the turnovers. I don't guess we got any turnovers, and that would be the one drawback that we're really trying to get more of those.
Does anybody doubt what Kirby Smart said a moment ago is true? Now, we're not in the locker room. We're not at practice every day. The media will get a chance to see some of practice here this week, I understand. But this is not one of those things where we're inside the room to know what's going on. But when you watch the way the team plays, when you watch the way these guys are interacting with each other on the sideline, does anyone doubt for a moment, deny for a second, that when Smart says, oh, this team has a really good vibe going right now, there's a good vibe for this team? Does anyone dispute that? I mean, doesn't it look like they're having fun playing with each other? And this team's not even fully healthy yet. There are guys who we think are going to be huge contributors who are either not playing or not playing yet at the level that they might be, and your starting quarterback is injured, for goodness sakes. And yet that's doing nothing to harsh the to kill the buzz for this Georgia team. They're just having a good time. I don't think anybody would argue that's what's going on right now. And it's one of the reasons why when it comes to issues with the offensive line or issues with the running back or issues with any of that kind of stuff, we said, hey, just give it time. Let this team show you they can throw the football. And all of a sudden defenses now have to think about how you want to defend UGA. You can't do like you did in 2019, where you just stack the box and dare you to throw it because you thought Georgia couldn't do that. All of a sudden now, opposing defenses are in conflict, especially Arkansas, who likes to drop a lot of guys in coverage anyway because that's kind of benefits their personnel. But I mean, they had seen Georgia throw it against Vanderbilt, Georgia throw it against South Carolina, Georgia throw it with Stetson Bennett against UAB. They had seen the way this passing game has evolved under Todd Monken, and they had to defend on the basis of what they'd seen on film. All of a sudden, that opened up opportunities for a running game that's been maybe slow to get out of the starting blocks to begin the season. On Saturday, they had their opportunity, and Smart said the coaches were ready to take advantage of that, knowing it was maybe going to be there. Here's Kirby again, this time in the running game.
It's not a reinvigorated run game as much as it is you take what they give you. And we felt like it was important to play the game patient but aggressive. And I would have definitely thought there might have been 53 runs in this game, 57 runs, whatever there were, because that was the kind of game plan that we needed to approach it with. And you know what? It might be different next week. The best teams I've ever been around can take on the personality of what they need to take on. And I'm really proud of the offensive line. I'm proud of the offensive coaching staff who did an incredible job game planning against what is a very good defense, in my opinion, a very good defense, and they did a really good job of game planning for that. So it had nothing to do with Stetson Bennett, the quarterback, had nothing to do with the reinvigorated run game. It had to do with what we thought it took to win.
So let me finish up this portion of the conversation by saying this. First of all, that's really strong stuff from Kirby Smart there. But let me finish up the portion of the conversation by saying this. I told you on Friday's show, for those of you who got a chance to experience that, I told you on Friday's show that I thought Saturday was a day for UGA to make a statement. And I brought up a few times last week that Notre Dame game in 2019, which was the big hyped home game against a highly ranked opponent, and yet Georgia was also a really big favorite that day. And most Georgia fans, I think, went to Athens back in September of 2019 thinking they were attending a coronation, that Georgia was going to put on a show with the new LED lights. They're going to dominate an opponent that Georgia fans have zero respect for, the Fighting Irish. And it was all just going to be really, really easy. And the game actually turned out to be a little tougher than we thought it would, even though Georgia won the game. It wasn't the kind of bold, brash statement that a lot of folks thought Georgia might make against the Fighting Irish. And that game was in the back of my mind going into Saturday against Arkansas, because what I said going into the game against Arkansas was this was a chance for the 2021 Dogs to make the kind of statement that Georgia couldn't make in 2019. And what I told you on Friday was, hey, boy, to me, a flex from UGA would be Georgia in the 30s, Arkansas in the teens. If you won this game 30-something to 17 or 30-something to 14, that was a message to the whole world that Georgia football is meant to be taken seriously here in 2021. And I said that thinking that JT Daniels was going to play at quarterback. I said that thinking that Smart was probably sandbagging by mentioning the Daniels injury on Wednesday, that Daniels would play, Georgia would score 30-something points, Arkansas would get there 14, 15, 16, 17, whatever else, and it was a chance for Georgia to make a big statement. Well, lo and behold, Daniels wasn't healthy enough to play on Saturday, and yet it did not matter. Georgia got its 30-something, they got 37. But they shut out the number 8 team in the country in their own stadium with a gazillion 4- and 5-star recruits there, with fans frothing at the mouth, making it as loud an atmosphere as you ever could. It was a statement for Georgia. It was a much more emphatic statement than I even had imagined possible. And it doesn't win you the national championship. We can't do that in first Saturday in October. But it certainly sets Georgia up on a course here and on a path towards what really could be a special season. Right now there's unity amongst the fans, amongst the players, amongst everybody else. Everybody seems to be having a good time. And as long as Smart said a moment ago, no one gets complacent in all of this, as long as game faces remain on, this fun ride that Georgia's been on, maybe it's going to continue for a few more weeks as well. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Good to have you with us, no matter how you get to us today, live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, of course, starting at 9:45 at DawgNation.com and the DawgNation app. Radio noon, Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, podcast, Apple, Spotify, the Google Player for the Android folks. There's all these other like podcast platforms I don't even know about. We're on all of those too. That's a really cool thing. Some of you listen right there on SoundCloud. Some of you listen right there at DawgNation.com. However you get to us, really appreciate that. Big thanks to all of you. And a huge thanks to Pella Window and Door of Georgia for making it all possible. Energy efficient windows and doors. That's what they do for you. Better looking on the outside, feel better on the inside. Nationally known company, which means unparalleled resources. Locally owned branch right here in Georgia, which means you get unrivaled family-oriented service. You can meet them in person. You can meet them virtually. You can walk through all the options that are available to really takes advantage of something that can really make your house better in terms of how it looks on the outside, which can increase your resale value, how it feels on the inside, which can help you save money on your energy bills, all kinds of good stuff. Also, between now and October 28th, you can take advantage and get 40% off qualifying installations or 0% interest if you pay for your project in full within 12 months while also making regular payments. So good stuff there. Pella's got great warranties there as well. Unparalleled expertise. Just good stuff all the way around. A couple of ways to get in touch. Find out online, pellaofga.com/DawgNation. That's pellaofga.com/DawgNation. Or give them a call, 678-638-1496. That's 678-638-1496. Just let them know BA from DawgNation Daily said they would take good care of you, because I know that they will. All right, we have John STINCHCOMB here coming up in just a moment. We'll do a Classic City Lager Insider Update with him. We're also going to get more heavily into the quarterback situation before the show is done. I'm going to kind of like share my thoughts about this to John, about what I think Georgia should probably do here. Now, listen, I'm not a medical expert, so you should certainly take all of this with a grain of salt. But John and I will talk quarterbacks. We'll let you hear what Kirby said. Actually got a lot of fireworks in that post-game press conference when the subject of Daniel's health came up. So that'll be pretty entertaining. We'll do all of that here coming up in just a little bit. Before that, though, I'm going to go around the doghouse, and it's assisted today by AAA. And I thought there was a very, very important moment in the early stages of Saturday's game that to me just shows program growth for UGA. And listen, Smart has always known way more about football than I ever will, but it is important to remember that we have watched Smart in his first seasons ever as a head coach. And I'm sure that Smart would privately talk about the ways in which he's kind of maybe grown and matured over the course of that time, and I'm sure his own feelings about his own personal growth may be different than what I've observed for him. But there is one area in which I think that Smart over the years has clearly changed for the better. I think it's important to note this, and I think for those that think of Kirby Smart as a competitor, when they think of Georgia as a competitor, what you're seeing from Smart now, I believe, is really bad news. Because once you pair great talent with like an aggressive mindset, then it's game over, go home. It really is. I would say that over the course of Smart's first few years as a head coach, I kind of think that Smart was at times a little too conservative. Not just when it comes to like running when you could have thrown or getting after quarterbacks when you, as opposed to like dropping back and being gap sound. I'm talking about, when do you go for it on fourth down? When do you forego the chance to punt? There were a few times in the early Smart years where, he'll punt from like the 37-yard line or inside the 50, and you just don't want to see an elite team do that. You want to see an elite team kind of grab its opponent by the throat. More and more, that's what you're seeing Georgia doing. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. On Saturday, Georgia's got its defense playing at an amazing elite level on offense with a lead. This is the time in the past where maybe the old school football mind would say, your defense is playing so well, just punt the ball and let your defense do its thing. You'll get the ball back in a moment. But the correct attitude there is, hey, my defense is playing so well, so let me be aggressive on offense. And that's what Smart did, going for it on fourth down, converting there early in the game, and talking about why he did. As we're around the doghouse assisted by AAA today, don't miss this moment from Saturday's game, because it's an example of the fact that as the Georgia talent's kind of coming into its own, Smart is seemingly also coming into his own as an aggressive coach. This is bad news for UGA's opponents. Here's Kirby.
Well, I wanted to show confidence in our players and our offensive line and the demeanor we're trying to create. And to be honest, I got a lot of confidence in our defense, so if we don't get it, we got to be able to handle that. And we were not in field goal range, right? So it was not a real hard decision for me. It's either punt it and gain 20 to 30 yards or go for it and possibly get 7 points. So it didn't make it real hard. And if we hadn't gotten it, and I'd live with that too. You know what I mean? Like, that's part of it. That decision was made a long time ago in my mind.
I mean, I won't bore you with all the math geek stuff, but it absolutely is almost always the better decision to go for it on fourth down from a probability standpoint if you have the choice. That compared your odds of converting the fourth down and then turning that into a drive that scores points compared to what happens even against Georgia's elite defense when you give the football back to somebody else, mathematically the odds are almost always on the side of going for it on fourth down. You know, Lane Kiffin got dragged a little bit on Saturday for his fourth down attempts against Alabama. Mathematically, those were also the right decisions there as well. It's results-oriented thinking to criticize it because it doesn't work. You don't know what the result's going to be before you do it. You have to have process-oriented thinking, infinite game type stuff here. You have to have that going on, and in football, it's almost always the better mathematical decision to go for it on fourth down. There is a mountain of research on that from people far smarter than me, so I'll invite you to do your own research on that, but the results will bear out what I just told you. It's almost always the correct decision to go for it on fourth down. However, now that Smart is doing this, using the idea of I've got an elite defense, so let me take my offense out for a spin. I've got an elite defense, let me put my foot on the gas and I'll be more aggressive with my decision making. I'm telling you right now, this is bad news. And bad news for the folks who might be playing Georgia, I mean. And it really is becoming more deeply entrenched in his attitude as a coach. Because what Smart said Saturday after the play worked was one thing. But remember, go back to a year ago against Tennessee when he made a similar decision that didn't work, and yet Smart's attitude on this was very much the same thing, that if you're a competent coach who believes in your players, you make decisions to be aggressive. So it's easy to say that after it works, but here he is after Tennessee from a year ago when it didn't work. Here's Kirby Smart from 2020.
If you don't go for it on 4th and 1 at the goal, what are you telling your team? I mean, really, that decision was made long ago. So 4th and inside the 1 on the last play of the half, that decision was made for me probably 20 years ago. It's just who I am, what I believe, and philosophically, I don't really care what the score is. That's just what I believe.
So I think that's terrific stuff. A elite collection of talent with a coach who believes in that team, wants to show them how much he believes in that team, willing to be aggressive now on fourth down, something I would say that in 2016, 2017, 2018, Smart probably didn't do enough for my taste, but he's doing it a lot more now, and that, I think, leads to an even more lethal version of Georgia football, and Saturday was certainly an example of that. It's Around the Doghouse. It's assisted today by our friends at AAA. And, of course, when you think about AAA, I want you to think about their legendary roadside assistance. I'm traveling a lot on the weekends, and clearly that's something that I enjoy when I'm doing high school football on Fridays, going to Athens on Saturdays, whatever else. But you also want to think about AAA as well for your auto insurance, too, because when you switch and save with AAA, you can save on average $529. That's real money that you can put in your pocket. That makes a difference in your life. So switch and save with AAA. Go to AAA.com/auto insurance. More details on that. It's AAA.com/auto insurance for a lot more details on that. All right, before we're done, we'll get into everything that Kirby Smart said about quarterbacks on Saturday. We're a little clip heavy today. Smart said some interesting things. I want to highlight a lot of that. So we'll do that here coming up before our show is done. A little combative on Daniel's status and kind of what that means. But for now, on everything else, the improved play of the Georgia offensive line, at least seemingly, where this team ranks in the country, maybe only in comparison to one other team right now. A lot to be said about all of that. Let's do that with John STINCHCOMB right now as a part of a Classic City Lager Insider Update. Great to have him. Great to have all of you with us here as well on DawgNation Daily today.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
So really good stuff from Saturday. Georgia gets the dominant win against Arkansas, and there's so many different ways you can kind of break this down and look at it and see kind of what's going on there. I'm honestly kind of curious to hear what John STINCHCOMB has to say about this today, so let's get ready to do that right now as part of a Classic City Lager Insider Update. John, we can start big picture here. You saw some things I'm guessing you had to like from the offensive line. It was clearly as dominant a victory in a big game as Georgia's had at home, and really going back almost as far as I can remember, at least when you give the ranking of the opponent as a part of that discussion. What did you think about the Dogs on Saturday?
Well, I think they continue to separate themselves. This was a game that I think we all were expecting to bring some clarity. What kind of team is Georgia? How good is Arkansas? They were ranked top 10, and quite honestly, you look across the country and there is a stratification between the top two teams and everyone else. And very fortunate for Georgia fans, Georgia is one of the top two. And, you know, conceptually, you watch them play, and there's times where they look like the best team in the country. I think Saturday is a great example of that. Arkansas came in with a lot of momentum and confidence and really liked what they had coming to Athens. And it wasn't 5 minutes into the game before it was pretty evident for everyone that they were woefully overmatched. You start up front, Georgia, their ability to execute was probably the best that we've seen this year across the board up front. You know, the front five was putting a hat on a hat and moving folks, and Arkansas with that kind of unconventional, what do they call it, a 3-5. I mean, there's three down linemen, and they've got the multiplicity coming from the second level of that defense, and really they didn't have an answer for Georgia's run game on Saturday. And you talk about quotes. I like Coach Pittman's quote. You know, they played bully ball and forced us to like it, and that was very much the case.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm sure you're like me, John, that it's kind of nice now to have this game in the rearview mirror. We can go back to doing what I think you and I both enjoyed doing, which is rooting for Sam Pittman. Seeing him there on Saturday and on the sideline in the middle of the field, it was kind of weird to see him in the role of foe as enemy on Saturday. I much prefer him in the role of, you know, if he's not going to work at Georgia, then let me, you know, cheer for him what he's doing somewhere else, because I do think that Sam Pittman's great for college football. I think his personality is what we need in this sport. He doesn't take himself too seriously. He seems to have a good time. So I'm more than happy to start rooting for him again now, although I was glad that he lost this past weekend.
I couldn't agree more. And he's such a likable guy. I think everywhere he's been, he brings class. And quite honestly, I wasn't expecting Arkansas to make the leap that they've been able to make under Coach Pittman, especially not this fast. I mean, he's really turned that program around, and they play him with confidence. And you know, obviously they're not on the level of the Bulldogs and what team is right now, but it's good for him that he was able to go home, and I will always be a Coach Pittman fan.
So I say this all the time, and you're right. I mean, clearly Arkansas is not in the same weight class as Georgia right now. But, John, you know this because you earned some of these victories over the course of your college career. It's not easy to get an easy win against a team like this. And whether it be Georgia handling Arkansas, Alabama handling Ole Miss, or any other games you might want to point to where the final score is kind of an impressive margin, I think you're making a huge mistake if you look at that and say, well, I guess Arkansas is not any good, or, well, I guess Ole Miss is not any good. I mean, you know, a lot of times what this is really about is about the team that was favored going out there and flexing the way they were supposed to. And the honest truth is, my assumption is that Arkansas will go on and still win plenty of games this year because a lot of what they do works. Styles make fights, and some of what Arkansas does well just doesn't really compare very well to Georgia because of how dominant the Georgia defensive line is, as a for instance, that it makes it hard for Arkansas to assert its stuff against UGA the way it can against some other opponents. But sometimes the blowout win is not one of those things where you go out and say, well, I guess this wasn't a big game after all. No, it is possible just to play really well in a big game, which would I think that Alabama did against Ole Miss, but in this particular case, what Georgia also did against Arkansas.
Across all three phases of the game. I mean, start with that first quarter. Dominant defense, made plays on special teams that resulted in points, and offensively did what we've been begging this team to prove they could do in running the ball effectively. So, you know, with the controversy, if you will, at quarterback, being able to come into a big-time top 10 game where College game day is in town and there's lots of pressure, the stage was none too big for any of the phases that Georgia threw out there. And, you know, don't underestimate Arkansas. For them, but that's a good team.
Got a little bit of a phone issue with John. I think, John, we lost you there for a second, but I think you're back with us now. You can finish that last sentence if you want to. I think we dropped out on you for a second there.
Yeah, well, I don't think you can undervalue that Arkansas is a good team, and Georgia just really came out and made them look pedestrian at best, and I think that goes to the mindset that this Georgia team is playing with right now.
How cool is it for you, and I think Holly Rose said this on the TV Saturday, that noon game compared to the night white game, I should say the night game whiteout for Penn State against Auburn, louder decibel level there at Sanford Stadium for the early start. Smart had made that challenge. Smart gave a lot of credit to the fans after the game's over with. You're a former player, so you kind of see the world as a former player. I've been a fan my whole life, so stuff like this is kind of matters to me. I love the way that Smart makes the fans really feel a part of this, and to me, part of the fun of this Georgia team thus far this season is how deeply entrenched the role of the fans seems to be in all of this.
It's got to be, and quite honestly, it's harder when you play in a number of big games like Georgia does. Penn State, what a cool atmosphere that was with the whiteout. But those are rarities. I mean, they can get up for those games, and I love the Holly Rowe was saying was 105 decibels at the Penn State game, and it was already 110 in that end zone for Georgia against Arkansas, and I think that just speaks to the fan base recognizing that Coach Smart asked for the fans to turn out for an early game, and they answered that call just like the team has this year. When you're a good team and you play in the SEC, you're going to have more than one moment. There are other teams that prepare for that whiteout game. Well, I mean, how many of those has Georgia had already? At least two. And with more expected down the road in the regular season, not to mention what's to come after the regular season ends. So I think it's a battle that you try to create consistency of playing at a high level, and that expectation extends to the fans where, no more complaining about, powder puff home games.
Yeah.
We need you to show up with regularity, and Georgia answered that call on Saturday.
You mentioned a moment ago the comparison between Georgia and Alabama. It's fairly obvious that those two teams have separated themselves from the rest of the country, but if you want to do the side-by-side here for a moment, do you think that Georgia has made a strong case of being better than Alabama, at least based on the beauty contest the first 5 weeks? If you had your vote, are you giving your number one vote to Georgia at the moment?
No, because I want Georgia to stay hungry. I mean, if it was a secret ballot, maybe, but I think it's always best when you can play that underdog role and have such a talented team like Georgia. There's still plenty to prove. I mean, we played good ball, but I think everyone, given the choice, would want to enter into that scenario with the chip on their shoulder, saying there's still more to prove.
I got some more I want to talk to you about here in a moment. Obviously, the quarterback thing, a big thing from Saturday. We'll get into all of that in a moment. Let me remind folks, our Classic City Lager Insider Update with John STINCHCOMB right now. Of course, we love Classic City Lager. I had a little bit of Classic City Lager yesterday, kind of relaxing, watching some NFL football, and just enjoying a good Sunday at home. A little rainy outside. It actually worked out to be a pretty good day after what had been a very busy weekend. So I'm sure many of you doing the same thing this time of year. It's just good cold beer. I'm a simple guy. I like simple things, and Classic City Lager is that. It's a lager-style beer, which means it's a lighter beer, but there's no sacrifice in flavor. It's a craft-style lager. Look, Creature Comforts has been famous for craft-style beers for a long time, some of the most beloved in the industry. And now Classic City Lager, kind of the next iteration of all that, kind of a lager-style craft beer selection, really fun. 6 and 12-pack cans, wherever you're doing your shopping, you can find some Classic City Lager. It is just good cold beer, so make sure you check out some Classic City Lager today. John, it got a little combative after the game on Saturday when it comes to Kirby Smart being asked questions about JT Daniels. Obviously, Georgia withstood the absence of its starting quarterback against the Razorbacks. Seems hard to imagine they could do that, though, for the rest of the season. And it seems likely that the status of Daniels and the questionable nature thereof, lat injury, once the oblique, how connected are they? I'm not smart enough to know that one way or another. But the point is, it seems like we're going to be doing this now every week for the next several weeks of wondering how healthy JT Daniels is. What do you make of this situation at the moment?
Well, it's unfortunate. I think JT Daniels gives Georgia the best opportunity to win at the end of the day. I like Stetson. I think he comes in, he plays with confidence, but he's just not he doesn't have the ceiling that JT does. I think JT has the mastery and the ability to see and execute in ways that Stetson doesn't. Obviously, Kirk Herbstreit's a big fan of Stetson's mobility, as he mentioned multiple times on Saturday, which is, you got to factor that in. Stetson's a more mobile guy. But I think most Georgia fans understand that when you're looking at the big picture, playing in those big games, JT Daniels is the man that you want taking snaps from under center. And with lingering health issues and, these obliques, these lat muscles, I don't know exactly what he's dealing with, but I've seen and played with guys that had something similar, I'm guessing, and they linger. And it's one of those annoyances at times that you're either trying to tolerate or play through. Once you get to that point where you can tolerate and play through it. And that's unfortunate, but it is what it is. I mean, the football season doesn't wait for any player to heal. It keeps churning on. So the quicker a healthy JT Daniels can suit up and be Georgia's best option again, I think that's better for the entire team.
So let me give you an opinion, and I'll be the first to tell you, John, this is not an informed opinion. So this is just kind of my own armchair quarterback, or maybe it's like the armchair medical trainer opinion about the quarterback here for a moment. But there's a part of me that wants to say a partially healthy JT Daniels that's partially available to Georgia is not doing anybody any good. It's not doing Daniels any good. It's not doing Georgia any good. And we're going to hear the audio of Smart on this topic before we're done. But if Smart does truly believe in Stetson Bennett, if he believes in his defense, if he believes in his team, if he believes this team is capable of rallying around whoever's playing quarterback, then maybe you just got to shut JT Daniels down. Maybe you got to say no practice this week. You're not playing against Auburn. And I'm not saying that because I think Auburn's going to be a pushover. On the road at Jordan-Hare Stadium without JT Daniels is a really tough game. Auburn showed something on Saturday against LSU. This is not a walk in the park necessarily going, on the plains on Saturday. I get all of that. It's not a disregard of the opponent for me to say that. It is an idea that maybe more rest would lead to a healthier Daniels later on, and that maybe he's capable of playing against Kentucky and being in rhythm for the following Saturday against Florida. But maybe the idea is maybe they shouldn't even try to play Daniels on Saturday. And if you really are a national championship team, you can prove it by winning on the road with Bennett against a hated rival like Auburn on Saturday. I realize that doesn't come without risk, but John, maybe that's what Georgia needs to do right now.
Yeah, and that's a difficult call to make. Sometimes it can be the right call, but you're weighing that decision of, is he ready? Are we forcing it? Are we creating situations where it lingers longer? And also balancing that with Auburn's a good opponent in a difficult setting that is playing like a cornered animal right now. I mean, they're playing with a lot to prove, and no one less than Bo Nix, who is a prideful guy and shows flashes at times, and other times isn't quite up to the occasion. But he's got some talent, and he can scare some folks. And it's a game that you don't want to walk in too lightly. Not that I'm saying Georgia has that mindset or that's a fear, but I don't disagree with you, B.A. I think if it's one of those injuries, and like you, I don't know exactly what he's got going on, but if he can benefit from an extra week of giving that muscle time to heal, then I think it's certainly worth weighing. As a coach and medical staff, I mean, ultimately it's not the coach's decision, right? Between the player and the medical staff. But if they can analyze it and kind of zoom out, and there's none better in the country than Ron Corson, and say this would benefit him for him and his health this season to lay off a week, then that's the best decision. Now, with that said, BA, sometimes these injuries, you're going to feel them all year long, and it's not going to heal until you have 6 weeks to give it time off.
That's important.
that's probably the discussions they're having.
No, that's important, John. I'm glad that you brought that up, that maybe a little bit of rest only does so much good. Maybe it's one of those things where if you had a lot of rest, it might make a difference. And I'm just not smart enough to know the difference there on that. But that's really good stuff, John. Thanks for being here as part of our Classic City Lager Insider Update. We always love hearing what you have to say about these big Georgia wins, and they're coming fast and furious here this season. I hope that continues, and we'll look forward to getting a chance to talk to you about that here next week.
It's been a great season to be a Bulldog.
Boy, it really has, John. We'll talk to you next time.
Sounds good. Thanks, BA.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, really good stuff from John STINCHCOMB. Man, it's important to bring that up. We're going to do more quarterback here before we're done. We'll hear from Kirby, and it got pretty intense there for a moment. Smart going back and forth with some reporters on Saturday. But John's addendum to what I said of, hey, maybe it is just rest, right? Give him the rest, let him get healthier. Because a lot of that's based on the idea that what's more difficult, trying to win a game at Auburn without Daniels available at all, or trying to win games later on this season with an injury that maybe lingers a little longer than it otherwise would? That becomes the comparison here. And maybe there's just not an easy answer to this, but if there's something you could do now to make it better later, even if it made things more difficult in the immediate, I believe that's probably the decision that I would make, and you better believe there's going to be a lot said about that here this week. Something else is going to be talked about a lot as we head into the Deep South's oldest rivalry on Saturday, Auburn and Georgia going head-to-head, and this is like a really fun thing. It's what they call the beat week, where both Auburn and Georgia are trying to beat each other when it comes to giving for the various alumni associations. This is a really fun thing to do. For those of you that love supporting the great work that the university is doing, great chance for you to show that. If you'll go to DawgNation.com right now, right there at the top of the page, you can kind of click in on this, and there's like the beat week. You see Auburn on the one side, you see Georgia on the other. You can click to give to Auburn, or you can click to give to Georgia, and clearly Dog fans here want to give to the Dogs. And as I'm looking at early this morning, I've got 28 folks already given to Georgia. None yet have given to Auburn, at least when I checked on this very early in the morning. I know it's going to get closer as time goes on here. So we talked to you about the UGA Alumni Association a lot. We really believe in the mission of the University of Georgia, the way in which it's making the world a better place through research, through raising and educating that next generation of Georgians to go out there and impact the world there as well. Obviously, it takes financial resources to do all of that. A lot of the ways in which some of you show your love to the University of Georgia is by giving to UGA. Well, not only can you do that this week, you can also beat Auburn as well as their folks try to do the same thing here. It's kind of a fun, good-natured competition. So if you go to DawgNation.com, click the banner right there at the top, you'll see the chance to participate in Beat Week here this week and beat Auburn as dog folks give to the University of Georgia here, raising some money for the Alumni Association. All right, let's transition now to our SEC Through, and my gosh, we could do an hour's worth of SEC Through today. We can't obviously spend that much time. How much fun was it to see Florida lose to Kentucky on Saturday? And as predicted, Dan Mullen would find a way to celebrate the close nature of the loss. He was asked after the game, and I don't know which reporter asked, but I guess credit to that person for, phrasing the question this way. Did you get out-coached when you lose a game like this? And Mullen's like, nah, we didn't get out-coached. We outgained them. Talked about the yard advantage that Florida has. Like, this guy will celebrate the most meager accomplishments in the face of a loss. Did that against, Alabama a couple weeks ago. Did that against Kentucky on Saturday. And lo and behold, who would have thought? And I say that sarcastically because we, basically said this, that when you have spent the whole first month of the season in the friendly confines of the state of Florida, playing FAU, playing, South Florida, playing Alabama, playing them close there in the swamp. Florida patted itself on the back for doing that. Tennessee the following week. Lo and behold, when you go into hostile territory, things get a little bit more difficult. A Commonwealth Stadium, a little bit of a much more challenging place to be, and Florida lost. And, credit to Kentucky here. This has not been a perfect season for Kentucky, but they are 5-0 right now. And so, they got their reason to celebrate when it comes to all of that. So I think this is a really pretty fun time to watch Dan Mullen have to squirm here a little bit. To think they've already lost twice this season, halfway to the 4-loss total they put together a year ago. We are very happy about all of that. You better believe at the end of our show, when it comes to Golden Shoe submissions, we're going to be hitting Florida hard the next couple of weeks. And it doesn't make the game against Florida for Georgia any less important or any less, intense or anything like that. Georgia's still got all the motivation in the world to beat Florida coming up in a couple of weeks. but we revel in the Gators' demise. And after Saturday against Kentucky, and we had some fun with this on social media on Saturday night, Florida fans are turning on their own right now. We started off the show talking about all the unity that exists around DawgNation right now. There is not unity in the community when it comes to the Florida Gators here at the moment. So that is all really fun. Also, the other big story around the SEC on Saturday, Ole Miss goes to Alabama, the beginning of the game. Now, remember what the backdrop for this game had been. Michael Wilbon had called Lane Kiffin a clown. Remember that? And a lot of folks got really upset with Kiffin, or I should say with Wilbon, for making it personal against Lane. And what we said was, listen, being at Ole Miss for 5 minutes and scoring some points and being funny on Twitter, that's not enough to make people completely forget the way in which, Lane Kiffin had kind of behaved in his past, whether what can be confirmed or what's been alleged, whatever else, that you got to do more than that to completely change your reputation in the eyes of folks who don't have, a stake in the game when it comes to Lane's success there at Ole Miss. And I got to tell you, on the basis of this little dust-up, Michael Wilbon's the clear winner here. Wilbon called Kiffin a clown, and Kiffin behaved like a clown before the game. You can't do the get your popcorn ready mic drop and then go out there and get blasted. You just can't do that. And it's like the whole thing was just so phony and contrived. It wasn't even like coming from like a genuine, authentic place. He's got the headset mic on. He's like, get your popcorn ready. He totally rushed the delivery. It wasn't natural. It's like this thing that he planned on doing. Then he almost got too nervous to actually pull it off. It didn't come across as real. And plus, like the idea of the mic drop has become such a cliche that actually nobody really does mic drops anymore. That's the thing, is like the mic drop moment is such a put on thing anyway that people don't do that. But Kiffin literally did the mic drop. He had the headset microphone on. He said, blah, 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 get your popcorn ready, and then took the headset off and just threw it on the ground. They were down 35-0 within the first 5 seconds. At least it seemed like that way. What a disaster for Lane Kiffin. And, I talked about this, I think it was on the pregame show on Saturday, our Kroger Kickoff. So Nick Saban goes and does this interview with ESPN where it's this story about the way that Kiffin and Saban had worked together. And, it's hard to get Nick Saban on the phone, right? But think about this. Like, the ESPN writers, there were 2 of them in the story. I think Alex Scarborough was one. I forget who the other one was. So they basically interview Saban and ask him to talk about Lane Kiffin. Like, there's no way Kirby Smart's going to do an interview about another coach and basically make another coach sound cool. He wouldn't even done that for Sam Pittman, who he actually genuinely likes. Like, Smart's just not going to be, as they say in pro wrestling, he's just not going to put him over that way. And, Saban's, putting Lane Kiffin over to no end on this ESPN interview. And I'm reading this thing. It's actually pretty fascinating. So I'm reading the story. I'm like, why is he doing this? Like, why is Saban helping Kiffin sound cool like this? And then you see the game play out on Saturday, and you're like, oh, Saban doesn't view Kiffin as a real threat. He's more than willing to make Kiffin be the offensive genius and the guy who helped transform Alabama. He's more than willing to make Kiffin sound like basically Saban's henchman, but, he's not worried about that, making Lane Kiffin be a real threat to him as a head coach. Of all the former Saban assistants who think that they'll one day beat Nick Saban, it's fairly obvious that Nick Saban does not think Lane Kiffin will ever do that. Otherwise, he's not going to praise him to ESPN the way that he did. And listen, Lane Kiffin has been fun for Ole Miss, and Ole Miss is going to probably win some games the rest of the season. But, you've seen the way that Alabama, whether it be Big Al, the mascot, the people on CBS, everybody is roasting Kiffin for the whole get your popcorn ready comment. He walked right into it. It's just not the kind of thing. I say this sometimes. That is just not presidential. This thing where you give a ready-made, jab to any would-be rival or any, blowhard on TV or anything like that. When you make it that easy for your opposition, Michael Wilbon included, I don't know if Michael Wilbon has spiked the football over his Lane Kiffin stuff, but he would have every right to do just that. All right, let me do a couple other things very, very quickly here before we hear more from Kirby Smart. I'll say this very fast. So I hate Auburn as a Georgia fan, and I can't stand to get picks wrong, and I picked LSU going into the game against Auburn on Saturday. Even with all of that, watching Bo Nix on Saturday was still incredibly entertaining for me, because this is just the thing that makes college football college football. There was nothing from the recent past that would suggest to you that Bo Nix was going to go on the road and play the role of Johnny Manziel for Auburn against LSU. But he's like, he's in the pocket, he's on the move. I thought Joe Tessitore had a great call for the game because he was really kind of giving voice to like the miraculous nature of Nix leading Auburn there that night. These are two like wildly inconsistent teams. Both programs in their own way are kind of a mess. This was good stuff. And listen, I didn't stay up till 4 in the morning when this game ended. I recorded it and watched it early Sunday morning before I went to church. But even still, this was just a lot of fun. And I don't know what it means for Georgia against Auburn on Saturday. I really don't. But I got to tell you, I was pretty entertained by the Bo Nix show on Saturday. And that's kind of a weird thing to say because I was not rooting for Auburn, both because I don't like Auburn and because I picked against them. But you know, Nix did his thing on Saturday, and that was just kind of one of the things that makes college football college football. All right, one more thing here. A lot of you want me to take my medicine because I really have talked up Texas A&M. And that looks like a disaster right now. Now, I'm still not selling stock in the program all the way around, but they are clearly kind of a mess here through 5 games. So if you want to mock me for that, by all means, get that in. And tomorrow, when we have a little bit more time for SEC through, we'll let some of y'all drag me across the coals if you want to for all the stuff I've been saying about Texas A&M because they've now lost twice, and they lost to what I thought was the worst team in the SEC on Saturday. So I deserve every word of that. We'll give you a chance to do that tomorrow. For now, we'll make that your SEC through. And we want to turn our attention back here to the Georgia Bulldogs for a moment on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Because speaking of getting your popcorn ready, for those who were tuned in for the press conference on Saturday for Georgia after Arkansas, they got some popcorn moments because Kirby was asked, I think in every instance, justifiable questions about JT Daniels, and Smart was pretty fired up. Now, I think it's fairly obvious to kind of see what's going on here with Smart, but nonetheless, it got pretty interesting. There was a lot of reaction to this over the course of the last 48 hours on social media, so let's cover some of this right now. JT Daniels doesn't play. Had been rumored to be a game-time decision. Being on the field when the warm-ups were going on, it was very, very clear, just to the naked eye, that Bennett was the starting quarterback, that Daniels was not behaving like a quarterback who was healthy enough to kind of go out there and do what he needed to do for Georgia on that particular Saturday. There have been some mysterious moments involving quarterbacks this season during warm-ups. This was not mysterious. It was very, very obvious that it was going to be Bennett's day against Arkansas on Saturday. So what about JT Daniels? Smart talked about that after the game. Here's Kirby.
Yeah, it's week to week, guys. I mean, do your research on a lat injury. It's one of the largest muscles in the body. It can be strained, it can be stretched, it can be torn. Dak Prescott went through this injury, and Dak's, we think, was more extreme than I'm getting a little bit of an echo there, Claude. Dak's was more extreme than we think JT's is, but JT's is a grade 1 lat sprain, and we think we're going to be able to get him back. But we don't know when. And I know this, the men in the locker room have confidence in whoever we put out there. And I know y'all don't believe what I say. I know you say, yeah, whatever, that's just coach speak. We have confidence in our quarterbacks. Like, I have a lot of confidence in Carson Beck. Brock Vandagriff goes in front of me every day. So I'm very pleased with the quarterbacks we have. It's unfortunate that JT can't go because it's not like we've done anything to make him worse. If anything, he's had a lot of time off. And we don't know if – the oblique compounded the lat, but they're 2 separate injuries, and it's been flaring up on him, and it's a painful injury that we're hopefully going to get him back from. But I can't explain it any more than that, but I'm not losing sleep over it, guys, because it's beyond our control. And Stetson Bennett is a really good quarterback. And I keep saying that, and, people don't believe us, but he's a good quarterback.
I'd love for Smart to speak more on the subject of, and maybe it's just unknowable, or maybe the answer is just no. But I'd love for him to speak more on what if Daniels didn't practice this week? What if he didn't play on Saturday? By next Tuesday, is he a healthier quarterback if he does that? Because if that's the case, then what Smart said there at the end is not true. The notion of it's completely out of our control. I mean, if rest would improve his condition, then it is somewhat in your control. And it just simply comes down to a matter of, do you need a 85 or 90% Daniels, whatever he is, to try to play against Auburn because you feel like you're in a dangerous spot on the road if you don't have Daniels. And there's a chance that you do. I mean, there's a chance that Auburn on the road is just a really tough spot. And even though Georgia's, nearly as big a favorite in that game as they were at home on Saturday, Maybe the actual game is, in Smart's mind, tougher than that. Maybe you do need to have all hands on deck, Daniels included. But if I could ask Smart a question, maybe I'll get bulldozed the way that some of the other inquisitors did. But that would be kind of my thing of, do you think he would just benefit from more rest? And, Smart's not going to say, yeah, we think we can beat Auburn without Daniels. He's not going to say that. But in a moment of candor, I would be kind of curious to see, do you trust Bennett enough? Do you trust your team enough to go on the road without Daniels? And if you did try to do that, would that benefit JT to have that extra week? Smart was, though, pushed a little bit on the thing of, well, was Daniels close to being playing on Saturday? Because you had kind of said it might be a game-time decision. Here's a little bit more of a heated exchange between Smart and a reporter.
Was it close at all? Or Stetson made it sound like he was the number one guy all the way.
Why is this the conversation? I mean, was it close at all? He couldn't play. He couldn't go out and effectively lead the team and play. To do that, you don't need to have a strained lat. Now, could he have gone out there and handed off the ball? Possibly. But that's not – guys, you're missing the window. Like, y'all are making the story all about that. The story should be about these fans. The story should be about these players that go out there and lay it on the line and play their butt off. And I'm so proud of our offensive line, our tight ends, our receivers who didn't get a ton of catches and they blocked their butt off, and their defense and the special teams unit. Make it about that, guys. I mean, JT's going to be okay. Make it about what matters.
Well, I only asked that follow-up because you did say that it would be based upon the pregame. But
that's right. It'll be based upon the pregame next week too. So we go ahead and write that down. It's going to be based upon the pregame next week to see if he's ready to go.
So to a degree, I think Smart's got a point that on Saturday, what mattered for Georgia more was how it responded without JT Daniels than the fact that Daniels didn't play. But if you listen to the post-game press conference, it's about 3 or so questions before Smart finally got asked about Daniels, 4 questions before he finally got asked about Daniels. I'd say that our post-game show reflected a similar sentiment. We probably talked for about 20 minutes in the post-game show before we got into, hey, Daniels' health is going to be an issue for Georgia. So I think that what Smart's saying is true, that what Georgia did on Saturday was the most important thing, and I felt like that media in the press conference, our commenters in our post-game show kind of gave Georgia its moment. Hey, how good was this offensive line? How good was this running game? How dominant is this defense? Talk. Oh, yeah, by the way, what's going on with your starting quarterback? And I think that was kind of the appropriate ratio, that it's not a non-story. You got to talk about it, but it's also not the biggest story. And I thought the press conference and our post-game show, for the most part, kind of reflected that. I think our content on this show kind of reflects that there as well. Now, Smart's going to exaggerate his point on this because he wants his team to continue to have something to rally around, and I kind of get that. But at face value, the notion that on Saturday something mattered more than Daniels not playing, that's true. And I think the way in which media reported on the game, fans talked about the game, I actually think that fairly well reflected all of that. Let me let you hear one more of Smart kind of talking about what it really means for this team to have this conflict right now of how healthy Daniels is and how well that Georgia can play with Stetson Bennett if Daniels is not able to play. One more from Kirby.
Do you think your ceiling is just as high with Stetson Bennett this year as it is with JT?
Probably not a fair question because you're asking me to make a comparison or an opinion. And I've probably seen more snaps of those two than anybody, right? Because I was here the whole time with Stetson, and some of our offensive staff has been here the whole time with Stetson, as well as Monken's been here the whole time with JT. So I just think it's a hypothetical, Jeff, and I'm not upset with you for asking it, but I would have begged to my team, why does it matter? Like, I think that both of them are really good players. We have a lot of confidence in both of them. And I think the outside perception is that, like, one guy's way better than the other, and I think both of them are really good. And I'm proud of both of them. I'm so glad that they've handled it the right way. JT's frustrated. He wants to play quarterback, and he doesn't get to when he has an injury. Stetson just goes out and does his job and wants to be there to help the team. So I don't think ceilings. I think growth, and that's where my focus is.
Let me do a quick final thought on this really quick. And, on Wednesday when Smart says the thing about the lat injury, I guess I had a perception what I thought that was. I thought it was Smart sandbagging. I thought there's no way Smart would volunteer this if it really was true. And it was clearly a mistake to try to presume what Smart motive was for saying the things that he said. And so I'm not going to try to do that on this either. However, one can't help but notice that the way in which the news unfolded that Daniels likely wasn't going to play, and then eventually it became more likely than not that he wasn't, the way that unfolded actually worked out pretty masterfully for Georgia, because parallel to this, you have this intense crowd you're trying to build up, and imagine the air that would have come out of the balloon in the stadium on Saturday had people just found out right there in the spot and in the moment that Daniels wasn't healthy enough to play. Because as Smart alluded to, this is true. The outside perception is that Daniels is better than Stetson Bennett. I have that perception. I think just about everybody listening has that perception. He is the starter for a reason. Smart also, I think, privately, would acknowledge, why people think that there as well. But Georgia does have a capable backup, a backup that has won plenty of games in SEC play with over the course of the last couple of years. And some of those moments have actually been pretty big. And so Georgia on Saturday was able to, in a very clever fashion, move from its starting quarterback to a backup quarterback without deflating the atmosphere in the stadium, and put a game plan together against the number 8 team in the country that resulted in a 37-0 win. That's pretty impressive, all things being equal, for Georgia. This is going to be a story that lingers. But Georgia showed you on Saturday that it kind of has a plan to handle all of this. And obviously a healthier Daniels later, I think, really matters for Georgia. How you get there, I'm not smart enough to know. But on Saturday, all the buttons that got pushed from a physical and emotional standpoint, they all got pushed very, very effectively there for Kirby Smart. One more thing before I wrap up the show. A lot of you had big-time action down on games on Saturday with my friends at BetUS. I hope you won. I mentioned a moment ago getting it wrong on the Auburn-LSU point spread, but there were also some games I got right on Saturday, which always kind of feels like a nice thing. And if you haven't taken advantage of the big sign-up offer from BetUS, do that today, because when you first get going there with my friends at BetUS, America's most beloved sports book, been taking care of their players more than 25 years, when you find that out for yourself by signing up today, you're going to get a 125% sign-up bonus. Use the promo code DN125. The DN stands for DawgNation. The 125 stands for the 125% sign-up bonus you're going to get. That means you put $100 in your account, they're going to give you $125 on top of that. You start with $225. That's just like a simple math way to understand all of this, which means you're a winner before you even place your first bet. Monday Night Football tonight. Baseball playoffs get going this week. All the sports action. You can get wagers down on all of that with my friends at BetUS. Of course, heading into another big college football weekend coming up next weekend. DN125, the promo code to use. 125% sign-up bonus, your reward for doing so. BetUS.com, that's the website. Make sure you sign up today. All right, as promised, we're going to have a lot of fun with the lousy, stinking Gators, and another loss for Florida. A close one they can celebrate, this time to Kentucky. First of all, let me give a shout-out here to somebody on Twitter who shared this with me. Dan Scotchmer shares this with me. He says, the Cats social media team wins the weekend. I appreciate Dan sharing this. It's the viral video that you may have seen with the Kentucky hat over the dude putting the gator in a garbage can. First of all, this is just an amazing act of humanity to even get the gator corralled like that, and to think it's the cat mascot. That's pretty good stuff all the way around. Great job by Kentucky on that. So yeah, Dan, we'll give you a golden shoe for sharing that with me, because I think that's really pretty funny. Also, good job by Kentucky. On the big screen at Kroger Field, Commonwealth Stadium on Saturday, they showed off Harris English, the guest picker at game day on Saturday, the only one on the set there to pick Kentucky over Florida. Good job by English for getting that right after winning the Ryder Cup. Nailing that pick's a pretty good job. And then funny to see Harris English celebrated on the big board there at Commonwealth Stadium. Good stuff all the way around. How about Gatorator Countdown? 26 days from right now, Dogs will beat the lousy, stinking Gators again, we believe. We'll see you tomorrow on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella, window and door of Georgia. And on video. Time now for our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Boy, a lot going on with the program right now, and we're glad to be able to talk to all of you about it. And we'll continue that now as part of our Cool Down. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric. R.S. Andrews will show up. They'll do all of that for you. They'll do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. Story after story, R.S. Andrews has been delivering smiles. And that's why they really, they meet and exceed expectations each and every time that they come out and do work for you. So I love recommending them. And if your water heater goes out, in many cases, R.S. Andrews can replace it for you, even in the same day. So they just do great stuff for you. And they'll do that for you today. rsandrews.com for a lot more on that. All right, let's get some more comments. I'll do a few more at DawgNation.com. We'll do Facebook. We'll do YouTube. Brian Whitehead says, I'm a fan of Bennett. He does his job without complaint. What other quarterback do you know that takes no first-team reps, told you the third-string quarterback through fall camp, yet keeps working, preparing to play? When his number is called, he balls out, no questions asked. Yeah, I've said this before, and it almost seems like I'm joking, but I'm being serious. Like, I don't know how he plays as well as he has with, in some instances, what seems like very little practice time, at least in terms of working with the number one offense. Think about Arkansas a year ago, kind of did that. Maybe the UAB game this year was another example of that, where, some in a very limited practice window, he seems to find a way to kind of get it done. And like, this is not hyperbole. Like, Alabama does not have much of a backup quarterback situation. They've got, Bear Bryant's grandson, which is a total case of nepotism. At least I think that's what's probably true. I don't believe that's the next great Alabama quarterback. And I think the folks in Tuscaloosa kind of know that this is not, like Talia Tagovailoa is gone, right? He's up at Maryland now. Like the quarterbacks that you could have conceivably played, that's just not quite there. Clemson doesn't quite have the same level of backup quarterback. That was a team that started the year in the top 5, although they are now unranked for the first time since 2014. There are a lot of programs that don't really feel good about their backup quarterback situation. One of the reasons why Texas A&M is struggling so much is because of an injury to a quarterback. The fact that Georgia has a backup that has won against an Auburn team that was ranked in the top 10 when the game was played a year ago, pulled a come-from-behind victory in dominant fashion against Arkansas last season, stepped in for you on Saturday. You never had one chance to really think about the fact that Georgia was in harm's way with its backup quarterback in the game. I think that's a pretty good thing. I think Smart overstates it when he says that, something to the effect of that they don't see much difference between Stetson Bennett and JT Daniels. I think that's overstating the matter to the extent that's what Smart even said. But in terms of being the kind of quarterback that you can win with, I think that's all pretty good stuff. J. Bob says Stetson is good, but bottom line, most fans think JT Daniels is the quarterback to lead us over Alabama, and I would think that there as well. I don't think that Georgia can win the national championship with Stetson Bennett as its full season quarterback in the very biggest games that it played. I'd love nothing more than to be pleasantly surprised to find out that's not the case. I do think you need a healthy JT Daniels to win the national championship, and part of what we tried to address on today's show is okay, so what can you do to get Daniels healthy? As John alluded to, what if it takes 6 weeks? I don't think you can give him 6 weeks right now, unless he just truly is hurt to the point where he's going to be missing a bunch of games. But if you have the choice of playing him, you probably can't rest him that long. But would a little bit of rest benefit him? If you could get him that little bit of rest, and if it would benefit him, then I guess I probably would. Connor Riley joins us.
Can I play you a quick audio clip?
Yeah, please.
I wanted to get this in the show, but the music was still going, so it made it a little tough. But
right. So Mullen is bothered by all this because of two things that he does. At one point in time, he kind of goes into high-pitched voice. Oh, yeah, we had a couple guys miss practice.
Oh, yeah. Dan Mullen kind of goes into the high-pitched voice. We may have to examine some of that high-pitched stuff from Mullen to see if we got some tells from him on the on the post-game press conference. Yeah, that's really, really good, Connor. Very good all the way around. Brian Whitehead says, I'm calling it now. Bennett comes in during the national championship, leads Georgia to the win. That'd be a Cinderella story. Boy, that really would be. Yeah, Jermaine King. Yeah, you got a little bit of a chortle for me on that one for sure. You definitely got a chortle for me on that. Score check agrees with Kevin. Kevin Mills says, this is the point he agreed with. He says, JT could stay another year. Draft stock obviously suffering from this injury. Yeah, I don't really know about that. I mean, he does have the option to stay another year. I've always presumed that he probably just wouldn't, and I guess even with these injuries now, I'm presuming that's probably still the case. But he does have that option available to him. I think that the NFL scouts are not going to make too big of a deal about a muscle injury, though. They want to, like knees and things like that, make them very nervous, right? They really want to examine those very closely because that's a problem. Something like this, I'm guessing, does not move the needle for NFL scouts very much. But as you kind of point out, this is not what Daniels came back for. Daniels came back to be healthy, and right now that's not the case. And so, it kind of stinks that this is going to be around as much as it's going to be around. This is going to be a very big topic for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. And I'm not going to play the guessing game. I played the guessing game on Wednesday and I got it wrong. And look, I'm not one of these guys that pretends like everything I say turns out to be 100% true. And, you know, like I'm more than happy to take my medicine. You know, some of these people online are a little different than that. But I'm not gonna play guessing game on this anymore. You know, it is whatever it is, whatever it kind of turns out to be, and it's just going to be with us. We're going to have, you know, and to an extent, Smart, should keep doing what he's doing. He's got to get the team rallied around whoever wants to play with, or I should say, he's got to get the team rallied around whoever it's going to play with. If it's going to be Stetson Bennett some more, then his job is to get that done. But here's the thing you can't discount. Like the Georgia players have made it pretty apparent over the course of time, they like Stetson. They do believe in Stetson. Not more so than JT Daniels or more so than anybody else, but Stetson Bennett seemingly has a lot of confidence within that locker room. That locker room seems to buy into him a little bit. I mean, remember, it was like McCole, Hardman, all those guys used to call him the GOAT. Now, I know the GOAT's kind of an overused phrase now. I mean, who's not the GOAT now? It seems like everybody's the GOAT. But in 2017, 2018, I don't think GOAT was quite as – I mean, is it fair to say that GOAT wasn't quite as saturated a term in 2017 as it is in 2021? And those guys were always like, you know, GOAT emoji on every time Stetson Bennett came up on social media. They love Stetson Bennett. Y'all, I mean, you've got to put some stock in that at a certain point that, you know, what a group of players thinks about their guy. Raymond Fossaway says he might not lose you many games, but the fact is he was 5 of 16 with a touchdown, 1 pick. He's not going to win. Yeah, he's the backup quarterback for a reason. That's just the case. But if you weren't transfixed by what you saw on Saturday, like if you weren't blown away by the, and I don't mean, I'm going to be hyperbolic here for a minute. If you weren't blown away by the awesomeness of Saturday, then you're just doing it wrong. You just are. And so when Smart kind of, you know, goes over the top to chastise people for like missing the window what the real story was, to a degree, Smart's right. And I think some people are like, yeah, Smart, give him hell, beat up on the media. Smart could be saying this to some of y'all because some of y'all, all you ever want to talk about is quarterbacks. And Georgia on Saturday could have played with 10. Bennett could have come sat next to me and Georgia still would have won. Like, that's pretty remarkable. That's pretty remarkable. And so I get wanting to talk about quarterbacks, and we're going to. I totally get all of that. But if you weren't blown away by how much Georgia did on Saturday and how little the quarterback even mattered, I just think you're missing it. I think you're really, really missing it. Steve Schaffini. I like a good pun, and Steve nailed that one with the actual GOAT giving you the bad cliche. That's not bad at all. Bill Sanders with a nice reference to Edge and Christian there as well. I love that. I love that. Very good. William Gleaton said I could have handed the ball off on Saturday, but that's kind of the point. It's like there are not many teams in the country against a top 10 team that could have just rendered the quarterback a non-factor. Quarterback's the most important position in the sport. And Georgia is so thoroughly dominant on Saturday that you had no reason to even think about the quarterback. And listen, you know, it's entirely possible that if Bennett plays more this season, he could eventually be the reason that Georgia wins some of these games. I think that's a possibility too. But on Saturday, Georgia was trying to get the best noon game crowd ever. Georgia had game day there. I mean, at a certain point in time, you have to sort of step back and say, wow, Kirby Smart really kind of pulled this off, because gosh knows when he's trying to orchestrate some of this kind of stuff, if it doesn't go the way it's supposed to, gosh knows we noticed that. So on Saturday, you just sort of got to give him credit. Like it's almost like a party planner type thing where it's like he just pulled it off. He had game day there. He had, you know, the student section showed up ready to go. He had all of this happening, and he completely got people not to notice, hey, don't look over here and notice my quarterback's injured. Look at all the fun stuff over here, and it worked. I mean, I think you got to give him some credit for that. Let's see what else. Oh, yeah, by the way, I think it was Chris Tittle. I knew somebody in the comment section. I want to give somebody credit for this. I believe it was Chris. I want to make sure I have the right thing on this. There was talk last week, and I thought about this, that somebody was calling for those false starts, and I don't know what the total number was for Arkansas on Saturday, but was it five false starts? You know, a handful of them came right out there off the jump, and I was absolutely thinking about our comment section, and I believe it may have been Chris Tittle who brought it up, but I was absolutely thinking about the fact that was going to be the measuring stick that some of our commenters said they wanted to use for how loud that crowd was, and it proved out to be that way. Mike Tiffany says, with the big lead, I'm still trying to figure out why they gave the ball to Brian Robinson 36 times. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of an interesting deal over there. I mean, their running game, McClellan's injured now. It's kind of funny. Robinson's one of these guys that, like, that's not like the former number one back in the country, right? I mean, that's a guy from Tuscaloosa. I mean, he's a good recruit, but it's not like he was, number one back in the country or anything. Was it class of 2017 or 2018? I forget what class he was even from. Maybe it was 18. But their situation's a little bit different now than it has been in the past. Dan Patrick on the subject of Oregon losing on Saturday. Yeah, I mean, some of this year of chaos really is happening. As we said a couple of weeks ago, Georgia's job, stay out of it. Chaos can be happening everywhere. Georgia's job is to avoid the chaos. And so far, so good on that front. Let me go to YouTube here for a little bit. And we're going to get off the air in like 5 minutes, everybody. On YouTube, as a part of the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Tennille Calvino checks in to say, when is Big Bear going to break A&M's heart and commit to the G? Boy, it'd be a tough year for A&M. Tough year for A&M. And listen, as much as I want to take a bunch of grief for A&M not being as good as I said they would be, that could be some really fun stuff with the $9 million man, Jimbo Fisher, being kicked to the curb by some recruits. Scott Bolin says, don't you think the Florida-Kentucky – let me get more of this. Outcome simply dictates that UGA starts Stetson Bennett this weekend. Maybe so. That's an interesting way of looking at it. Florida now taking a second loss gives Georgia a little bit of a cushion were it to lose. But Georgia fans still don't want to lose to Auburn. And I know for a fact Kirby Smart doesn't want to. But that is an interesting way to look at it. I mean, part of me just wants to say, and I guess I kind of reserve the right to change my mind on this, but part of me just wants to say, hey, if you believe in Stetson Bennett that much, then put him out there against Auburn. Because I can't imagine JT Daniels is going to be worse off if he just doesn't practice at all. Now, maybe that's what they're going to do, and they want Auburn thinking about both quarterbacks, because this is a situation where the two guys are a little bit different. What Bennett does, what Daniels does is a little bit different. You are preparing for two different guys, and maybe Smart wants that. And maybe they're going to protect like a hawk everything that goes on at quarterback here this week. Or, I don't know. I mean, like I said, you get it wrong by trying to get into the chess match of all this too much. But if they did rest Daniels, I mean, you just want Daniels healthy late in the season. And I swear I wish I could get a straight answer from somebody on this. Maybe just nobody knows. But my answer would be, is there something that you can do to make him healthier later on? And I don't want to go back and like relive the past, but like, why'd you play him against Vanderbilt at all? Like, why'd you play him against South Carolina? Why'd you do these things? Maybe it wasn't hurting back then. I mean, there's very likely a very good answer to that. But if you can give him some rest that makes him healthier, then shouldn't you do that? And you say, well, what if you lose? I guess if you can't win at Auburn with your backup quarterback, maybe you're not really a national championship contender, right? I mean, if your championship status is that thin, if it can be punctured that easily, then maybe it's not as real as we all think it is right now. But as I said before, I just be paying very, very close attention to all that. Jacob Phillips says, do you see the run game being as successful against Auburn? I kind of do. I think what Georgia did on Saturday has the ability to translate, because I think Auburn defensively is probably not quite as good as Arkansas. And I think that you may have to – see, here's what I don't think is probably likely. Is like Saturday, Georgia overwhelmed Arkansas so much the quarterback didn't have to do anything. Against Auburn, the quarterback's going to have to do something. And, look, I go back to that 2019 game for a moment. We'll probably end up talking a decent amount about that this week. That game, I just remember this feeling so well, where Georgia got the early lead against Auburn, and the stadium was quiet. And I'm sitting there the whole time thinking, because I was there in 2017. That place was a house of horrors. And I can't stand Auburn. But I got to give them credit. What they did to, both those November home games in 2017, because this is one of those things where, Gus Malzahn used to whine all the time about having to go to Auburn and Georgia in the same year in the month of November and how hard that was. But the flip side of that always was, but the other year, you get those two big home games in the final month of every season. And that ought to be a chance for you to do something. Well, in 2017, they did something with it. Their home field advantage against Georgia and Alabama back in 2017 was really significant. So the whole time in that 2019 game, I'm sitting here thinking, is Georgia going to get out of this stadium without ever giving them a chance to get loud? And sure enough, finally a play happened, and all of a sudden now they're doing swag surfing, and now they're all making all this noise. And you're like, nope. Eventually this crowd kind of got involved in this game, and Georgia had to escape from a Jordan-Hare Stadium environment by the end of the game that felt like it feels to play at Auburn. That was my memory of the 2019 game. So on Saturday, you kind of think about the same thing. This is an Auburn fan base that's ready to turn on its own team, but they're also ready to get on the bandwagon. They can kind of go either way right now, right? It's like they're not quite so sure if they're the team that beat LSU on the road for the first time since 1999 or the team that almost lost to Georgia State. They're willing to kind of go either direction on this. So I think getting off to an early lead against Auburn and then maintaining that is so important because you can take this crowd right out of the game if you do, which means you're going to probably have to make some plays from your quarterback to do so. So the question was, hey, is the Georgia running game going to be as good against Auburn as it was against Arkansas? I think that it can be, but I think it's going to have to come in tandem with the Georgia passing game. I think your quarterback's got to make some plays for you on the road on Saturday. And, Bennett, Fayetteville a year ago, Auburn at home last year, Bennett's done some things for you. And if it's him that's playing, then you're going to have to give him the ball and let him have a chance to do that. I mean, he threw a dime to Kenny McIntosh on Saturday. So, but to have that running game be against Auburn what it was against Arkansas, you're going to have to probably make some throws too. All right, we got to get ready to go. Frank Patterson says, how about a Zeus toss sweep for 70-plus yards? That'll have the effect on the crowd. I like all of that. Jay Shipe says, who you got this week, Rebels or Hogs? I think Arkansas bounces back here in this spot. By the way, how about this? I don't know if Scott Harris is using the colloquial version of nephew or if he if Jack Leo, who's working with us, really is his nephew. But that's kind of cool. Some people call people their nephew now just because it's kind of like saying that's my buddy. But maybe that really is his nephew. Oh, that's a good point. Yida Cookie says that whole game turned bad on that leaping penalty. That was kind of a crazy penalty back then. You're right. That's probably about right. All right, let's see what else. Bubby Dean, good to see him in the comment section, saying Dogs can beat Auburn with defense in the run game alone. BAU could start at quarterback and the Dogs would still win. Maybe so. I'm glad to see Bubby so confident here. Shoot him 556 says, all that scrambling Bo Nix does ain't going to work against us. That's probably true. I mean, as I said before, I was very entertained by that against LSU on Saturday, but you ain't going to run around like that against the Georgia defense. That is probably true. Paul Moon hoping Big O is going to get some targets this week. I love the idea of that. That's fun to think about. Duncan Williams says Arkansas had 5 in the box and 2 to 3 deep made the quarterback not matter. Yeah, I mean, a lot of that was game plan dependent. I don't deny that. Oh, yeah, Jay Ricks pointing out that Kirby's son had the What's Funny, dry erase board. Some people are telling me this on Saturday night. I didn't know what they're talking about, but now I have seen it. It was going back to the Arkansas player who had kind of laughed at the Nolan Smith quote about keeping teams out of the end zone because I'm not always the classiest person. I'd also mock that on social media a little bit. And, yeah, everybody was having a good time on that. And so good job by the younger Smart for getting involved on that, and good call for noticing that. Thomas Van Sant also mentioning Tank Bigsby, which is going to be a big name here this week. Boy, so many comments and so many good things to say here, but we've got to get ready to go. Keith Finney's going to be giving up sugar this week for the Auburn game. I don't know if that's a reference to the sugar falling out of the sky, a la 1982. Gerald Harmon says Tank Bigsby's banged up a little bit right now, so we'll keep our eye on that. What else? William Gleaton says Auburn's going to run flea flickers, double reverses. Remember, that's Mike Bobo calling those plays, so no telling what he might have in store there on all of that. DawgNation.com. Big Dog Brock says there was a clip on ESPN of JT Daniels warming up, and you can clearly see he was in pain and not 100%. Yeah, we had a lot of video we showed on our Kroger kickoff, or I should say our DawgNation postgame show of those pregame warm-ups, and it was fairly obvious that, I mean, Daniels just was not 100%. It was very, very obvious. It was not a mystery to anyone watching those pregame warm-ups that Bennett was kind of going through the paces with the starting center, Cedric Van Pran-Granger, which is typically a tell, but Daniels' behavior, helmet off, kind of, I don't want to say he's walking gingerly. Sometimes you feel like you're reading into it, but it was just pretty obvious that Bennett was going to be the quarterback. Big Dog Brock's right about that. Jesse S. says, please comment on Mullen's smirk. We'll make this our last comment. Yeah, so Mullen had a weird, he's just an awkward guy. Like I said this going into the Wan'Dale Robinson thing last week. It's not unforgivable not to know the name of a player that you're going up against. I take Mullen at his word when he says he knows their numbers, not their names. Trust me, I know a lot of coaches, they're all kind of the same way on that. Names are hard to remember. But the fact that he got tripped up by it so much in a press conference, he's just an awkward dude. And that nervous laugh, that nervous smile, I mean, there are a lot of famous people that have a tendency to kind of laugh nervously when they're, in a difficult spot. You see a lot of that, and Mullen's kind of that guy. It's like this goofy smile of, hey, I just lost on the road as a big favorite. Let me go over here and shake Mark Stoops' hand. He's just an awkward guy. He's not comfortable in his own skin. He's trying to be what Urban Meyer was. He's trying to be which, by the way, is its own issue right now. But he's trying to be what Steve Spurrier was, and it just does not come natural to him. He is not that guy. He is not what those dudes were, and he just looks very awkward in would be awkward scenarios. So he's walking there smiling, high pitched voice. It's all a big tell. So yeah, fun weekend. You love to see Florida lose. You love to see Georgia win. And you love to be on the ride that we're all on right now, wondering what's about to happen next. So we'll be here tomorrow to cover all of that with you. And we will slam on the brakes here now in a, kind of from one happy topic to a very opposite situation. When you think about the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, not because we don't love the AJC, but the AJC stories about the Falcons debacle against Washington yesterday, I'm not quite so sure how this one unfolded the way that it did. It seemed like there were a lot of opportunities for Atlanta they just didn't quite take advantage of. And that's just kind of a mess. But our buddy D-Lad had good coverage of all of that as Atlanta drops a very winnable game. And, boy, the outlook is totally different. If you win against Washington after holding on to beat the Giants, all of a sudden now you're thinking about being 4 and you got 2-2. That was what Atlanta would be if they would have pulled that one out yesterday. But 2-2, and everything feels like new life for a first-year coach. Boy, I'm just not so sure about Arthur Smith right now. I am just not so sure about all this situation. But good stuff on that online, Atlanta Journal-Constitution, AJC.com. Also, good stuff as the Braves get ready for the postseason. Yesterday was kind of a wild day as the final stretches of the regular season concluded. I told Connor Riley before the show began, I missed all of this. I was so knee-deep in college football that I didn't realize that, so much of the American League was kind of coming down to the wire at the postseason. That was actually kind of a cool thing to watch highlights of this morning and how, those playoff scenarios got played out. So that was pretty good stuff. You can read more about that as the Braves get ready for October there at AJC.com. Plus tonight, really cool thing. It's amazing the technology allows you to do this. For those of you that live in the city of Atlanta, obviously you're watching the Atlanta mayoral race very closely. There's also, just great political intrigue involved with something like that. And those candidates are going to face off tonight in a very interesting way, and that'll be a part of the AJC community conversation there this evening too. So that will be really good stuff. You can check out AJC.com for more on how you can access that video content there this evening. That will be really good stuff. So all of you, hope you have a great weekend. Excuse me. I'm being told that it's Monday, not a weekend. Have a great day. We will be back here again tomorrow for DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We'll really turn the page to Auburn. We'll get very, very deep into all of this tomorrow. So come back with us. We'll do that then. And thanks to R.S. Andrews for making the R.S. Andrews cool down possible. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric. They'll show up on time. They'll do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. So check out R.S. Andrews online at rsandrews.com for that. And tomorrow, 9:45 for the 1st and 15 on DawgNation.com, the DawgNation app. 10 a.m. for DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We'll talk to you then, everybody. For more DawgNation videos, check out youtube.com/DawgNation.